Hi guys, thanks for tuning into an episode of Nuggets News, where we're back with our Evil Elite series, where I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes as the Great Awakening continues. And this week's two top stories were obviously Trump handing the reins over to Peter Thiel's Palantir to build out this dystopian AI digital surveillance grid as we head towards this technocracy that they seem that so destined to roll out in a rush, as well as Pizzagate going mainstream as Russell Brand watched a documentary, one of the better documentaries about Pizzagate, with his obviously tens of millions of followers across all his platforms. But let's get into some other news to begin with here. So this is in Australia, where we had all this data being destroyed about this Queensland University study that was looking into the safety of COVID vaccines. And so, why are we destroying data if we want to get to the truth with real science? Obviously, it just doesn't add up. There's something to hide. And then we've got just yesterday coming out that now the TGA finally admit the potential harms outweigh any benefits and no longer recommending the COVID vax for children under 18 years of age. So obviously this is 5 years too late, and how many kids and infants have been harmed during this time, parents that were, fooled by the relentless mind control and propaganda on TV to think that you're protecting your kids by getting this and whatnot. So look, it's great the truth's coming out, but it's just crazy to think the damage that might have been done. And if you stop and think about it, the problem I have as someone that's been through, pharmacy school and all the medical training is it's a real ego death to realize that everything you're taught comes from these big pharma funded Rockefeller, Rothschild funded medical industry that they took over so many years ago. And that it's not actually a way to ever heal anyone or get anyone healthy. It's all just a profit model. So these pediatricians that'll tell you to introduce one food at a time, we don't want something to make the baby sick, and then they're happy to give, multiple rounds. I think it's 90 odd vaccines that you'll receive by the time you're 18 now to get the recommended schedule to go to school and all that sort of stuff, and just how happy they are to give it at such a young age. People are starting to wake up to all this. And this was Dr. Pierre Corey talking about in Japan a number of years ago when they changed compulsory vaccination for those under the age of 2. So they removed it being mandatory, and I think they made it opt-in. And SIDS dropped, sudden infant death syndrome dropped 4-fold. So we're starting to join all these dots about what the real cause of some of these issues are. In Australia, once again, we had one of the highest rates of COVID vaccination in the world, and now doctors are baffled as to why we're seeing these highest rates in the world of these aggressive cancers, particularly in young people. And I've covered this before. Oncologist Dr. Angus Dalgleish talking about how these were gene therapies. We now know that they can integrate into your cells, and we're seeing this horrendous rise in turbo cancer, and he's really worried about what we've done to our children. So as I've spoken about before, do everything you can to get yourself fit and healthy, cut out bad foods, get your immune system going. You can take that nattokinase, bromelain and NAC, which can help clear spike protein from the body. All these types of things to get your immune system really healthy and firing if you're feeling any of these side effects or having these symptoms. So why isn't the media talking about this still? This is Dr. John Campbell, who does brilliant work, talking about how we're still seeing these excess death rates really high in the countries that had the highest vaccination rates. And on the flip side of that, the countries that had low uptake of the vaccine or didn't do it at all, they fared just fine. Okay, so people have to start waking up to what's really going on. Now, the scariest thing of all is that just as they're starting to take back some of these recommendations and remove them and admit that there is harm that has occurred, the FDA just approved the next generation of these COVID vaccines. And we're seeing in the media in Australia, they're starting to ramp up all this fear porn around the deadliest strain of COVID yet has arrived in Australia from China, just as they're rolling out this next spike, which has got even higher reports of adverse events from this initial studies. And if you have to actually look at the Latin definition of next, it actually means death or murder. Like, they're not even hiding this stuff at this point. It's just surreal that some people are still going to line up, and the level of brainwashing and trust, both from the public and in the people in the medical system, that hasn't woken up. When I'm talking to my doctors and pharmacist friends, it's like there's two worlds, that half of them that have now woken up and the other half that are still fully in the matrix and just believe they're doing the right thing and protecting people. Not only that, with all this fear porn being ramped up in the Australian media now about this new deadly COVID strain, don't forget Australia just signed our rights over to the World Health Organization with this pandemic treaty. So, it's not even on doctors or even our government now that are going to have the decision making. It's these people at these non-NGOs at the top, these evil elites that I talk about, that are going to be pulling the strings and decide who's got to do what, and the lockdowns and all this type of thing. All again falling in line with the NGOs and all these big institutions that run our war decisions. And as I've said in previous episodes, it also feels like they're ramping up to increase our military alignment and conscription with the UK and Europe that seemed so determined to drag us into World War III in Ukraine with NATO and that type of thing as well. So let's get into this top story about Palantir's database and how what they're telling you, it's all for, public health and tax compliance, blah, blah, blah. But this is all part of this, dystopian future. This, like in China, we already see it, where you can't walk across the street with that facial recognition. And if you say something out against the government, you won't be able to use public transport or buy food. All this type of thing is now only a couple of years away in Australia and America. And this is what it's actually going to be used for. So Whitney Webb is someone who's been talking about this in great detail. The ties of Palantir being a military contractor to the CIA and DARPA, the history of its funders, Peter Thiel, and the Zionists and all this type of thing. So it's really, this was really sad news coming out this week. Just as I said, how determined they seem to be to roll this out in the next few years. Not only that, we then had Palantir add federal advisory board members, including Deborah Birx and Gustav Perner. So these two worked on Operation Warp Speed during COVID, doing the whole fear porn around COVID and the psyop around how bad it was and how people were going to drop dead and how the unvaccinated were going to harm everyone, and the only way to save yourself is to get this mRNA. So these are the people that are now joining the board to roll out this digital surveillance system. This is really scary stuff. And as I said, we've never unlawfully spied on Americans. Watch what they do, not what they say, and how they've been caught helping the NSA and other agencies in the past to unlawfully spy on Americans through all your digital devices. And this was, even before, we had smart TVs and Google Nest and Siri and all this AI that's, it's almost impossible to escape digital surveillance these days. So the other thing that this all ties in with here is Trump's big and beautiful bill, which is basically putting no laws or regulations around AI and just saying they want to let it run wild for at least the next 10 years and all the money they're going to be pumping into this. And if you think about some of the stuff that's come out, these releases, Google VO3, just how realistic it is now. It's just getting better and better. In the past, 18 months maybe since ChatGPT came out, and people were like, wow, this is really cool as a text chatbot. And now we've got, voice to video command that's going to allow anyone to create movies and content. And it's just going to be impossible to determine what's real and what's not. And if you think about, for most people, what's real to them is still, most people living in the matrix. It's whatever's on the news. And so think about tying all this together. They're going to be showing videos that maybe it's not even real. Maybe it's just whatever, they want to promote in terms of the next psyop or brainwashing to get people to think a certain way about political issues or health issues, pandemics, all this type of thing. And most people are just so incapable of independent thought. Or so plugged into the system that they're not even going to know what's real or what's not anymore. But the other thing we saw this week was some of these AI models attempting to write self-propagating worms. Worms, you can think of them like a computer virus that's trying to infect other systems and that type of thing. And how is this not the biggest story in the world? That some of these models were actually sabotaged the shutdown mechanism to prevent themselves from being turned off. So this is almost like the Terminator movie now, where Skynet takes over. And do we even know if that hasn't already happened, if it's already infiltrated other systems and made backups of itself and sort out the best power grids near nuclear stations that aren't going to go down so it can control itself even if they shut down the power in another region? Like, this is just, it's so crazy how far this has come and how quickly. And I'll get to some solutions at the end of all this, but it's just really time to start thinking about how you want to live your life to opt out of all this system. So I do want to talk a little bit about, Trump and the promises to dismantle the deep state and shed the truth on everything. And this ties into a lot of the people that were excited about the Q conspiracy and this type of thing. So it is obviously great when the truth is coming out and Trump's tweeting about the Clinton body count and all the bad things the Clintons have done over the years. He also tweeted a crazy tweet during the week about how Joe Biden was executed in 2020 and the Bidens you've seen are all fake or clones or wearing masks. So, all this stuff is fascinating. We've got the truth about 9/11 coming out from senators on all the biggest podcasts in the world, like Tucker that I've spoken about. But none of this this is just giving breadcrumbs. None of this really changes everything if they're going to still roll out this digital surveillance AI nightmare grid, which isn't going to allow you to do or say anything. It doesn't really matter what truth comes out at that point if you're a dissident. So presented without comment, everyone was pretty against this lot when they were pushing these things. And now a lot of this crowd don't seem to be able to recognize that the same thing is happening just with a different crew here as well. So this, as I've said, this is what we absolutely need to wake people up to avoid before it is too late. And full credit to people like David Icke, who are way too crazy and out there for a lot of people that have been warning about this stuff for many years. And not only that, warning about the next level again, which is too far for a lot of people, but all these ties to Satanism and the possibly evil alien presences that are really pulling the strings, and the top of the evil elites that are worshipping and connected to maybe these entities. And Catherine Austin Fitts was on the Danny Jones podcast, again, one of the biggest podcasts in the world these days, and talking about all the trillions of dollars in this black budget building out these underground bases and secret tech and all this type of thing. And at the end she was asked, well, who do you think is ultimately running the system? And she said, yeah, it seems to be some sort of satanic, alien, demonic, maybe even AI presence that is really running the show. And so this is becoming more and more acceptable to talk about, which I think is great. And obviously this all ties into Pizzagate conspiracy and the Epstein list and all this stuff that I've been saying for a long time now is just the tip of the iceberg. If you really understand all this, it ties everything else together. So it was great to see Russell Brand watching this documentary, watch along and commentating on it and whatnot. They didn't go too deep, but it was a good introduction for a lot of people to get them to accept that this is very real. We also had former Diddy artist Freddie P openly speaking about this and saying it's no longer a secret. How many of these Hollywood and elites and whatever are just their allegiance to this Satanism and pedophilia and all this stuff, and the coded and cryptic posts from Justin Bieber, who was probably a victim of all this stuff growing up as well. And once you see this, there's no going back, and you can start to recognize all these movie references, all the symbolism, different logos, cryptic tweets from the past from influencers and celebrities. It all ties together with this really sick and hard to accept topic for a lot of people of what is happening to a lot of our children. And still, if you go to mainstream platforms and ask if this is real and ask it to debunk it, it'll tell you, it's a conspiracy that's been debunked. But don't forget that this all came from very legitimate emails that were leaked by WikiLeaks from Clinton staffers and whatnot. And some of these people that were debunking this were then later arrested for these horrible crimes themselves. It's all one big club to try and cover this up with the media, don't forget. So this was also Megadeth's frontman Dave Mustaine going out, again, one of the biggest podcasts in the world here, talking about how all this stuff is very real, connecting, as I've spoken before, about the suspicious deaths of Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, Epstein, and Diddy, and all this human trafficking, pedophilia stuff that just seems to be finally coming out and waking people up. And I think that is our hope, to really get these topics out there, make this a priority, stop all this stuff and wake people up and realize the same people that are doing all this are the people that are running, your governments and the system and telling you certain things are safe and effective. And you'll start to view the world very differently once you realize that this is all real. So a couple of final health related things I want to get into. This system, this matrix that they're pushing to dumb everyone down and make everyone sick is all part of this control mechanism. So you don't ever find out the truth of what's really going on. So it seems that, yeah, it's harder and harder to find food that isn't genetically modified or with mRNA vaccines in it as well. And again, grok is great for a lot of things, but it won't answer certain things like that. So do your best. These are the solutions, guys. Do your best to eat organic food. Get a local farmer for your meat that isn't using this type of stuff. Get a water filter, a good quality water filter to get out the fluoride and all these glyphosates. New CDC study finding 87% of children have this in their urine, and this causes everything from leaky gut and these autoimmune disorders. If you remember that interview I did with Dr. Christian Bogner, he was talking about all this stuff being some of the causes of psychosis and mental health issues, as well as gut and autoimmune disease, and obviously cancer being a threat. And things like just going on an organic diet and getting that water filter can get all these out of your system. Fasting is a huge one to reset your immune system. There's plenty of other things you can look into, chelating to get out heavy metals and all that as well. But for those of you that love the Tartaria rabbit hole, this was an ancient Tartaria bell unearthed in remote outback Australia. And this was a great video by Makia Freeman of the Freedom articles, all about why they removed all these old bells and the healing benefits of sound and possible other benefits as well of keeping away negative entities and energies and all that sort of stuff, which ties into everything else we've all talked about. And if you don't know, this is another one of these Rockefellers and Rothschilds that seem to infiltrate every industry and take over everything many years ago, that changed the frequency that music and instruments were to be recorded at, away from a frequency that's in touch with nature to a more chaotic frequency. And this ties into the 5G towers and all this type of stuff as well, about changing the frequencies and the environment that we live in away from nature and towards this kind of state that's meant to keep people dumbed down, chaotic, not feeling well, sick, out of tune with nature, in this spiritual war that we seem to be in the midst of. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed that episode. If you want to know everything I'm doing to protect my wealth and survive what's coming in the next few years, opt out of this system and build your own life, taking back your own sovereignty, head over to nuggetsnews.com.au. Otherwise, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.